Good morning. My glasses are a little fogged over yet. I was going to get ready to do devotion and didn't have my phone. So I walked up to the house to get it on this nice warm day. Walked in and Cheryl says, no phone. And I just went on right on. No pool, no pets. Room still at 50 cents. So I was singing King of the Road the rest of the way back out to my shop. Today we look at chapters 46 through 48 of Genesis. And this is Jacob, Israel. It calls him both names, it's, in here yet. And it's a reminder to us of how God had renamed him. But anyway, Jacob had taken Pharaoh's advice or his invitation to heart. And he and all of his family loaded up and moved to Egypt from the promised land that God had promised them before, where Jacob owned land and everything. But they moved, all of them. And in chapter 46, it gives the listing of Jacob and his 11 sons, because Joseph was already there, with 11 sons and their sons and everyone that went. And it gives us a total of, 67 people, or 66 persons in all. And then the children of Joseph who were born there, and when you add in Jacob, came to a total of 70 people, not counting their wives. I mean, I would think you should count them too, but so it was the sons, it was the men, the males that were counted, and I didn't bother to go through and count them all. I just assumed that it was a correct number. But there were, so this was a small number in many ways. You're thinking about it, that Jacob had 12 sons, but those 12 sons had, you take 12 away, or 13 away from 7, you get 57. So those 12 sons had, had quite a few sons themselves and daughters. And remember that 2 of the grandsons had died because they had not found favor with God. So, but anyway, Jacob's whole family moved then to Egypt. And Joseph had told them that, when you come to Pharaoh, introduce yourselves, tell them that you are shepherds, you're keepers of the flock. And because shepherds weren't held in high esteem in the Egyptian eyes that way, but so Joseph brought 5 of his brothers and his father to Pharaoh and introduced them and said, they have settled in the land of Goshen, whichever way you want to say it, and with their flocks. And Pharaoh says, yeah, that's a good place for you to settle. Take the best land. He's still giving preference to Joseph and to his family, and has no problem with that. And then he says this, he says, if there are any among you skilled this way, I will put them in charge of my livestock. So, Pharaoh is seeing in these Hebrews, these despicable Hebrews, the good characteristics, the traits that they had, their leadership, their ability to watch for and care for the herds and the flocks that way. And so they settle in the land of Goshen. And they've been there for quite a few years, and well, yeah, I guess I need to back up just a bit. When Pharaoh and Jacob, Israel, are talking, Pharaoh asks him, well, how old are you? What are your years? And he says, the years of my earthly journey are 130. Few and hard have been the years of my life. They don't compare to my ancestors. And you think about, so here he is 130. Abraham was 100 when he had Isaac, when born. And Methuselah and some of the earlier people we read about were living, hundreds of years. And so Jacob says, this 130 years is, a few years, and man, we were to think today, 130 years, we have a lot of 100-year-old people in today's world, but it was, it's quite an accomplishment to live that many years. But anyway, and Jacob gives Pharaoh a blessing. And you'd think that the king, the Pharaoh, would give Jacob a blessing, but instead Jacob, this man of God, gives Pharaoh a blessing. And then it says that, Joseph provided for his father and his brothers and all of his father's household, according to the number of their descendants. And then it talks about, there was no food in the land, because the famine was so severe. And so during this time when there was, no crops being raised, they had all of this stored up because Joseph had been in charge of it, and people came, they no longer had money to pay. They had spent all their money. So they said, take our herds, take our flocks, take our livestock in exchange for the grains that we need for our families. And so then soon Pharaoh owned all of the sheep, all of the cattle, all of the hogs, all of the livestock. And then they come and they've got, everything is gone. So they say, take our land. So it wasn't long, and Pharaoh owned everything in Egypt, the land, the sheep, the cattle, and the people were really not much more than servs. They were tending the land, but they didn't own anything. And so then it was going on, and they had all. We get to toward the end of chapter 47, and we have Jacob's last days. He'd been there, it says 17 years that Jacob had been in Egypt, so he was 147, and he called his son Joseph to his side, and he says, my time on earth is ending. I'm going to be dying soon, and I want you to take my body and to bury it with my ancestors. Carry me out of Egypt and bury me in my ancestors' burial place. And Joseph promises to do that. And then Joseph brings his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, to his father for a blessing. Jacob says, bring them for a blessing. And remember, Manasseh, the older one, Manasseh, the name means forgiven. And, so the big blessing should go to the older one. But instead, Jacob, Israel, crosses his arms and puts his right hand on the younger son, Ephraim. And Jacob doesn't like that, so he switches his dad's hands. And his dad says, no, I know what I'm doing. This is, your son Manasseh will have many descendants, and he will have a great, he will be blessed with much. But Ephraim is the one that will be much more than his older brother. And then we see the death of Jacob, of Israel, and Joseph does as he promises. But Israel's last words to Joseph, I did not expect to see your face. I never expected to see you again. I thought you were dead, and here I am blessed to see not only you, but your children. And the blessing that he gives to Manasseh and Ephraim start in verse 15 of chapter 48. And he says, the God before whom my ancestors Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been with me, my God, will be your God. And this God, he challenges them. He reminds them that they will be blessed, that God will be watching over them, and that God has promised. He says, let them in my name be perpetuated, and the name of my ancestors Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into this multitude on the earth. And so the blessing that Jacob, Israel, is giving to Joseph's sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, it is the same blessing that God gave to Abraham, that they will be fruitful and multiply, and they will have many, many descendants that way. And so he has blessed Ephraim and Manasseh that way, and we hear that blessing. And at the end of this chapter 48, it says, now I give to you now one more portion than to your brothers. So Jacob, Israel, is saying to Joseph that you know, the land that we came from, 17 years ago is still our land. And I bequest this land to you. I am giving you your inheritance. And to you, Joseph, I will give you one more parcel. You will get a little bit more than your other brothers. He says, I will give to you the land that I took from the hand of the Amorites. You know, there's a ridge of land there that he promises to give them. So this chapters 46 through 48, we see the Israelite nation coming to Egypt because of the famine, because of the drought. And we see how Joseph has provided, how God has, through Joseph, provided for everyone. And it's an important part of the whole history of Israel and of the nation. And we're going to learn a lot more about that in Exodus. I mean, we're familiar with a lot of the story of Exodus as well. But so now by reading these 3 chapters of Genesis, we understand now why it is that Israel, the nation of Israel, came to be living in Egypt rather than in the promised land that God had promised to Abraham and to Isaac and you know, to their ancestors. But yet that land is still Israelite land. So tomorrow I don't know, I guess I didn't look to see, we've got 2 chapters left in Genesis, 49 and 50. I'm going to guess tomorrow we'll probably finish the book of Genesis. God's blessings on you this day. Stay warm.